and where we are and how we can get back, how we can work on this ideal again. So this is the important presentation by Rev Dr David Hanna. So please welcome him with a big round of applause. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Great, and welcome back, everybody. Here we go. Something missing. So, as Robin said, we're moving on to think about the cause of conflict and the path to peace in kind of two ideas in one session, really. And I think the little programs never got round to everybody, did they? Did you get a program? Okay, we can pass them round because it's nice to know what to expect in the rest of the day until 5 o'clock. So, in our second session, we're looking at the cause of conflict and the path to peace. As I'm sure was very obvious, in the first session we're talking about the ideal and original plan, this kind of idea, and we referred to that a few times. And understandably, hearing that, people think, yes, but life isn't like that. This all sounds very nice, but how do we get there, and how do we deal with current problems? So, of course, we have to be realistic with this, but I do think that having an ideal to, first of all, understand and then aim for is very important. And if we don't give that, especially in education terms, to younger people, then, what is it? Just finding a way to cope with life and the difficulties? What are we passing on? We need to go back to this original ideal and plan, and that's something which is very strong in Father Moon's own teaching and theology. So reality is tragically different, and we have a world of conflict around us, which I don't need to go into because we're very well aware. Everybody here is following news and world events. I'm sure you're that kind of people. So if we think about peace comes when we put those principles into practice, such as living for the sake of others. And to live for the sake of others is based on the pair system, which we looked at, which is a wonderful system for bringing unity at higher and higher levels. And I exist to benefit the whole, so I have a higher purpose as well. I'm not just here for me or to make the most of life that I can. I'm here for a higher purpose, and as part of that whole. So I put it diagrammatically here. There's a whole, and I'm just one little part. I'm actually taking up a big space there, but I'm not really that big. The whole is much bigger than I am. But if the individual is living for the whole, we'll find that naturally, it's a kind of law of the universe, if you like, that the whole then supports the individual that's living that way. And cause of conflicts comes when this gets upturned or reversed. So if I see myself as an individual separate from the whole, it's those people over there, it's society, it's the nation, it's the, politicians, it's, I'm not part of that. I'm the one who's left in a kind of miserable position because of them. If we have that mind, then this is a very self-centered way of looking at the world, and we have less regard for that higher purpose that I should be living for, and don't consider it and don't implement it. And somewhere I can start to think that others exist really for my benefit. That's why they're there, and that's what they should be doing. And it diminishes and ignores the value of the whole. So it's expecting to the whole to support me and to be there for me. So it's a different way of thinking, of viewing the world, of looking at myself in relation to others. Ideologies have at times encouraged the kind of conflicts that come through this wrong perception. Here is Father Moon speaking, for example, about communism in the 1970s, where it was very strong, a real force to reckon with, and in fact he put a lot of work and investment into developing a critique and counterproposal to communism, which was widely distributed. It's one of the reasons right now why our unification movement is under a very strong attack, because those communist authorities never forgot how their plans were scuppered and vexated by Father Moon's work, and by really the first kind of ideological challenge of note to their thinking. He said, for example, there, according to the logic of communism, there will be constant struggles. It's written into the theory there should be struggles. This is how progress is made, as long as there are classes of people. And in our ideology, that means UPF kind of thinking, there are no class differences, but only family relationships. Here there's no discrimination. There are no people above or below, but only the relationship between parents and children providing order in the family. So those relationships provide order. They don't have one kind of subjecting themselves over the other. And he continues, according to communist ideology, mine is mine and yours is mine. On our part, we must think mine is yours, and yours is the nation's, and the nation's is the world's, and the world's is God's, and God's is mine. So it makes a very virtuous circle in this way, based, of course, on true love that we talked about earlier, and valuing the higher purpose, and myself as being there to serve that higher purpose and live for the sake of others. So the spirit of unification must be greater, he said, than the power of communism. And so we have to develop this thinking and this power and this kind of demand to think this way and to counter false ideologies. And in practice, it has to be greater in hope and in ideals, because it has to be said, communist theory starts, and such atheistic, materialistic ideologies, they start with a kind of saying this will bring about the ideal. This is what we want, the ideal society, in which everybody is equal and free and taken care of. And to some extent, for some people, that is provided. But universally, it could never be successful, actually. And the era of communism, main era, still we have remnants of that, of course, through cultural Marxism and the likes, but in the main era, it lasted 70 years. That Father Moon predicted. He said it will decline after 70 years and could go no further. It never really produced genuine international links, and had links, but no unity on that basis, or could overcome racial difficulties or other such difficulties, and created divisions wherever it went. So the reality of the human nature, if we think back to the individual, it's something like this. We have a selfish nature which is very well developed in some people, and maybe others are not so influenced by that, but nevertheless everybody has some nature like that. But in each person is what this theory calls the original nature. You have an original nature. And in many cases that might be undeveloped, but it's still there. It's like your conscience is there. You can speak to a person's conscience and get them to naturally feel they should do the right thing. And that's always very, very evident, I think, in people who work with people who have a lot of difficulties socially or in terms of crime and the likes. You have to find that kind of good seed in a person and speak to that. interestingly, for many people, and teachers found this as well at the school I was working with, is the soft spot, even the worst people has, is for their mother, right? And it's like, do you want your mother to know this? No, don't. No, they don't want that, right? So, interesting, isn't it? So every person has that kind of heart. But we have a conflicted self. There's inner conflict in the individual. And this is an interesting area because it's really the area that only the religious world addresses. No one else is, you just think life is like this, let's find the best way to live. And the ideologies approach it that way, philosophers approach it that way, but religion is saying there is something fundamentally wrong. How did it get there, and how can we get out of that situation to be back on track? Look at some quotations. This is the time when we delve into the world scripture, right, from the group that I was in discussion with, and this is a favorite topic, I think, for many. Here from Sikhism is, whoever proclaims himself good, no, goodness approaches him not. So as soon as you start thinking, well, I'm all right, that's a dangerous point. In the spiritual path, that's a dangerous point because, you may think that, but delve deeper and you may find, well, you're causing somebody some problems and even yourself some problems. In Hinduism, in the Maitreya Upanishad, it says, the mind is twofold, the pure and also the impure. Two minds. In Native American religion, we have every person has both a bad heart and a good heart. Very simply put, isn't it, right? I like it, actually, but very perceptive and very, trustworthy, I think, the Mohawk tradition there. Here in Christianity, in St. Paul in Romans, who, we say St. Paul, he was a good man, obviously. And he says, I do not do the good that I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do. He's going through these struggles. And actually, that's more the way of a saint. The person who really lives a life of prayer and devotion starts to uncover more of that kind of inner battle and struggle, and something about them that's very difficult to change, that they're not happy with, this kind of idea. Of course, if you go the opposite direction, you're in a kind of pig happiness and you don't care about anything, you just think about yourself and everything's happy as long as you're well taken care of. So when you try to drill down into yourself, what is the problem, or where is my lack, and why can't I make the progress that I want, or why do I end up hurting people that I love? This is really the pursuit of the life of faith. Here, we have reported here in Islamic tradition, we have returned from the lesser jihad to the greater jihad. When asked what the greater jihad was, it is the struggle against one's self. That's the biggest battle. So important insights. And here, again, in Sufism, also from the Islamic tradition, the greatest struggle is with the soul that dwells within your sides, for it is your constant companion. That struggle is your companion, right? It's going along the journey with you. If you overcome it, you will master all else. But if it overcomes you, you will be vanquished by everything. So there's this common theme in these world traditions that, they didn't set out writing this together or thinking about this together. They came across these inspirations or revelations or thoughts, however they came about. They came independently to the same conclusion. So conflict is in the human mind, actually. And I searched the internet to find the most conflicted looking person that I could. So I don't know who this is, but he won it for me. So there's some part of yourself which is drawn towards more self-centered things, and we could say evil, selfish thoughts and words and actions, where immediately the body, the desires of the body are dominating, sleep, food, sex, other things. They kind of take control and even destroy your best intentions. And this person also is drawn to good, unselfish thoughts, words, actions, people that he loves and cares for, and friends that he wants to do things for. It's going on at the same time, but almost any situation will be conflicted. And you hear about this when certain people open up about some of their struggles. Somebody says, or they gives to kids. This is my old secondary school RE, isn't it? You are out walking and you find a wallet stuffed with money on the ground. Then many people, well, some people will just take it, and spend it. But most people will think, should I take it or should I not? Should I hand it in or should I just keep it? They go through a long struggle. What's the struggle about, right? Really, there shouldn't be a struggle. You found somebody's wallet, they're missing it, go and take it to the police station or somewhere, hand it in where they might be looking for it. It's simple. To me, it's simple, but we could struggle over this kind of thing, or something is available. You're in a shop, nobody's looking. Can I slip it into my bag, this item that I really think I need? Let's do it. And of course, once a person does that and gets away with it, they think, well, maybe I can do this more often, right? So there's this struggle going on all the time in individuals. We can say it's a battle in the mind of each person, and it manifests as conflict in the family, in the society, and in the world. So it's that conflict which we see when larger groups are fighting together, or it's because of the individuals involved. Does that make sense? If there was not a problem in those individuals, there wouldn't be a problem in the way they interact with each other. So really our society could be, if we were all caring, trusting, loving people, it would be fine. You wouldn't need locks on doors, right? Because nobody would think of stealing what is yours and, is not mine. It would be very uncomfortable to do that, right? So the origin of conflict, this origin of this kind of situation, or the human condition, is written about and talked about in all the major religious traditions, going back to many stories, and also in cultural traditions. They have their stories about this, as we saw from the quotations that I shared. And often they're in the form of myths which contain very deep insights very often. They're like wrapped up in this story coating, and they have some very important human insights, like revelations, we could say, from a religious point of view. And they have some intuitive understanding of this human condition, and are often metaphors. And surprisingly, as we see, they're universal. In the biblical story, for example, Father Moon looked at this and prayed about this for years deeply and really sought to get to the bottom of this. It has a story about Adam and Eve and eating an apple and, tempted by a serpent, and you might know the story. And you could take it literally, some people do, but he wasn't satisfied with that at all and could immediately recognize this fruit. It's a metaphor for something, but for what? What is this forbidden fruit? Our ancestors, first ancestors, are told of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it you shall die. It's a very strong prohibition and a warning, don't do this. Of course, it's largely thought of as just don't disobey God's commandment, and that would be wrong. But what is it that's so wrong? What is it that being tempted by, they actually lose their life and their position and their place in this idyllic Garden of Eden and are saddled with this kind of burdened down generations, what we call in the Judeo-Christian tradition the original sin? Well, fruit is certainly a metaphor. For Father Moon, the conclusion he came to through this long spiritual journey and fight is that it's love itself. Love is that fruit, especially the holy husband-wife relationship in that second great blessing or foundation of peace that we talked about. It's that which, if violated, causes so many problems. And does this make sense? Is it a good metaphor? Well, in the language of the day, in the biblical language, because we have the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, to know is to have sexual relations. Actually, it's there. It's common. And to bear fruit is to produce some kind of good result. And presumably that's good fruit that you want to enjoy. And to bear fruit is to pass on through the lineage. So this was affected. This was interfered with at the very beginning of human history. Things did not go right. So the fruit itself is more desirable to our first ancestors than life itself. They're willing to disobey this commandment in order to, and risk, you could say, losing their lives. So it's portrayed as being essential to fulfilling life's goal. Actually, it's through that you can, handling that properly and obeying that commandment, you can attain the tree of life. And tree of life is like representing, ourselves in our fullness as God intended to be, true human beings. Everybody with me? Is that all right? I'm going to have a little sip. Please excuse me. So cheers, everybody. I can't share it with you, but Wow. Let's go on a little tour of the scriptures again, right? Here in Jainism, where's our wonderful Jain? Wonderful. Uttaranga Sutram. It's better to die than to indulge in partaking of forbidden lustful pleasure. Now, is that strong or is it strong? Right? That's pretty strong, isn't it? So this is just what others are saying, right? I'm not kind of saying you have to stick with this, but let's look at what they're saying all around the world. The man who goes to the wife of another digs up the very roots of life. And that's from Buddhism in the Dhammapada. In Islam, in the Holy Quran, do not come near adultery, for it is a shameful deed and evil, opening the road to other evils. It's this kind of gateway problem. In Judaism, in the commentary, in the Talmud, it says, what was the wicked serpent contemplating at that time? He thought, I shall go and kill Adam and wed his wife, and I shall be king over the whole world. This is a way to assert a superior position that's not rightfully mine, but I'm going to take it, and I do it this way. Aren't there dictators and despots who've done that in their life? Right? Often using this for their own ends. Here in the Mahabharata, formerly all creatures were virtuous. That's the kind of ideal state, right? And by themselves obtained divinity, became God-like. Then women, who had been virtuous became wicked witches, and Brahma filled them with wanton desires, which they in turn inspired in men. He created anger, and henceforth all creatures were born in the power of desire and anger. Wow. So it's trying to get to the root of this problem. St. Paul, again, said, flee from sexual immorality. He who sins sexually sins against his own body. You're violating your temple, God's temple. And that's a problem for you if you do that. Of course, it's somebody else is probably getting hurt and injured, but this is damaging yourself. And again in Islam, O children of Adam, let not Satan seduce you in the same manner as he got your parents out of the garden, stripping them of their clothing in order to expose their private parts. Again, something sexual going on. Or in Sikhism, sexual desire is the window, pain and pleasure are the gatekeepers, virtue and sin are the gates. So a more kind of poetic approach, as is sometimes the way in these more mythical traditions. So What Father Moon's teaching is saying is that, yes, Adam and Eve are first human beings, were given, or maybe intuitively they knew they should keep to this commandment. And God spoke to them, do not eat of that fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But they were open to temptation. If they had gone through their growing period and become mature individuals spiritually, then under God's blessing, they would have enjoyed a marriage blessing and be able to start a family as true parents or as good parents. And that would have produced a good lineage. It's where love became self-centered and then is brought into marriage that problems start. So if a man, for example, it could be either man or woman, but if a man is immature and self-centered, but his age is for marrying, and he puts on a very attractive face to somebody and woos this lady, and they get married, he's brought into that marriage and eventually family, that self-centered person, he has problems. Do you think those are going to come out at some stage or another? Yeah, they're going to come out at some stage, right? And, the person, you're not really the person that I married, is often a phrase that you hear when couples have difficulties. Because, somewhere that was a pretense. And there are problems that haven't been dealt with or shouldn't have existed, in the individual, which have been brought into the marriage situation, and other people suffer. Wife suffers in that case, children suffer. The father is maybe prone to anger, maybe strays and has relationships with other women, causes difficulties, which is very hard to undo that damage, especially for future generations. So it brings down what we call the fall in the theological terms, but it means losing that position and that status and being unable to hold one's head high with kind of pride as a son or daughter of God, and not attaining spiritual maturity, but having that way blocked, almost like uncharted territory. We haven't gone through that. So, I quite enjoy thinking from different perspectives, not just the religious one, but maybe it's like a stage of evolution that human beings have to go through to really learn how to love properly and to exercise love in a true way. And we haven't done that yet. There's a part of our growing as human beings that we haven't fulfilled. And until we do, we are going to be causing difficulties to each other. It makes a lot of sense when you see what people do to one another. So here's Father Moon talking in a speech called Religion and the Ideal World. What's the reality of our world today? Well, disorder and sickness of every kind, including war, violence, and drug abuse, have infected humankind. More important, the rapid collapse of sexual morality among the young, the increasing divorce rate, the breakdown of the family are all destroying the foundations of human society. All these things originate from the fall. So, however we interpret that, we could trace this back, and religions say that that is the case. So, we have to look at the reality of today, our kind of removal of any kind of moral constraints is very, very damaging, and I don't think we've taken stock of how damaging that is yet. Again, my teaching days, referring a few times to that, but, we were told as teachers in the classroom in this school it was actually in Greenwich, and I know a lot of people love Greenwich. Sorry, Greenwich. But we were told, don't use terms like mother and father. Don't use it, because it's upsetting to many of the children who don't either have a father or a mother or live in different kinds of families which have different relationships. So let's not use that word, right? Like it's an offensive word. So once you go down that road, where are you going? Where are you going next? And you can't I couldn't talk about these things. That's already a few years ago, right? Do you remember what we said about true, genuine love? To lighten the tone here, right? It's unconditionally caring about the happiness of another person. So what's a way of defining false or imitation love or conditional love? You could say it's I care how you make me feel. It's all about my feelings, which is inherently selfish, isn't it, right? I care how you make me feel. That means, if somebody doesn't feel loved, then I don't love you. I'm going to look for somebody else who makes me feel. Right? Or it's sometimes other aspects of love, not just the romantic love. It's the parent who is only showing love to their child when their child does well and gets good grades at school and comes home with a good mark, but comes home one day with a bad mark and then is very angry and, doesn't show love to the child. And therefore, it's teaching the child, when I do well, I'm loved. When I don't do well, I'm not loved. But the parent has to say, I love you, but we need to correct what you're doing, because it's not good for you, it's not the best thing, and I really want to help you. You have to, there has to be true love. Even if you're angry with somebody, there has to be, or correcting somebody, there has to be a heart of true love there in order to protect that person and let them know they're always loved. Right? And experiencing that is so important. I think there are many people growing up today who don't experience that unconditional love. And that's very tragic, because that's what the love they experience is what they're learning. They're going to replicate that in their families. And that's often why people have, I think, even today, they have profound religious conversions, actually, because they encounter God through some tradition, and God is a being who unconditionally loves them, and they feel that love for the first time, and like nobody has ever loved me that way, even miserable me who's done a lot of wrong things. So that causes me to change. I don't want to be that miserable, bad person anymore. I want to renew my life. So we call it in some traditions rebirth, being reborn, because I want to change myself completely. And people, even now, are going through that experience. Okay, you remember our three foundations from earlier: individual peace, peace in family and society, and universal peace, based on this kind of creation model of how God manifests himself in the world and creates the things around us, including ourselves. Well, these foundations have been corrupted, really from the beginning of human society. That means there's mind-body conflict. This is a first blessing problem, we could say. It's under some evil influence, mind and body are not working well together. In fact, body is dominating the mind in a way that it shouldn't. Then we are dominated by evil influences as well. This is a little quotation from a Divine Principle home study course, which is on Father Moon's teaching. To state that the world is under evil influences is to suggest there are negative spiritual forces operating in our lives. Such influences can affect a person only as long as he or she cooperates with them. Sin may be thought of as any act or thought which violates God's law and which inhibits negatively our own growth to perfection. So sin is thus never simply against God, it's also against ourselves, in that it violates our own deepest essence. So this leads us into the kind of second corrupted foundation, is conflicts in society and wars, starting in the family, actually, under these kind of evil influences. There's difficulty between husband and wife, and that gets, into the relationship of parents to children, etc. And the third kind of corrupted foundation is environmental damage. It's where people are not taking care of the natural world and not showing true ownership and true responsibility in that area. And what are the evil influences? It's all about the self. It's greed, it's exploitation. It's, I don't care about the future generation. I just want to get rich myself, right? Or, for the sake of expanding our nation or our ideology, we want to do this or do that. Well, out of this understanding of the fall, and it needs more study, of course, but Father Moon could extract what he called 4 aspects of our fallen nature. Our nature became corrupted as individuals. And there are 4 aspects to this. First, he said, is not loving others from God's standpoint. That's the introduction of the selfish element. I don't love others as God loves that person or others. So if I were to more stand in God's position and think, how much does God love that person, as much his child as I am, then I would have a different feeling towards that person. So it's including this extra dimension. And that is what essentially people can do through a really well-constructed prayer life. It's like saying, why, taking to your knees and asking God, why do I find it so difficult with this person, I don't assume that they're the problem, but why am I finding it so difficult? And asking God's help in that way. And then maybe learning, or through some other kind of almost coincidental way, you find some of that person's life or what they're struggling with, you start to have a different appreciation of that person. And you realize that we're very quick to judge sometimes. And it's not all about me or how I feel. In fact, it shouldn't be about that at all. It should be about how God loves this person. And then, if it's for me or as a way that I can help that person, show me the way to do that. The second is leaving one's proper position. So we all have a certain responsibility, or in a family we have a certain position and responsibility. So if we leave that because I feel I want somebody else's position, or I want responsibility, or I want people to treat me differently or more importantly than I feel they're treating me, this is reversing a proper order and leaving one's proper position. One follows the other. And I might even start to kind of make people involved. Let me put it this way. Sometimes think of it as falling downstairs. Anybody had that experience? You trip on the top step. I used to have a cat that slept on the very top step. It went very thin in the night. And occasionally going downstairs, you'd touch this rather kind of furry, soft thing. You weren't sure what it was. But then it let out a squeal. And you realize it's the cat. Almost threw you off, almost send you hurtling downstairs. You don't want to hurt this poor creature. Anyway, you could trip on a top step, and you can then turn head over heels, and you go further and further down, and maybe have an accident at the bottom, or meet somebody who's passing with a tray of glasses or something like that. What starts small can multiply. So this particular insight, I think it's a very profound insight into fallen nature, the nature that we inherited from our corrupted beginning, starts with a self-centered viewpoint. Now, that starts in the mind, actually. And to be honest, if I were having a really selfish thought in my mind right now, you would know, right? You wouldn't be able to tell because it's in my mind. So it starts in the mind, and it, in a way, doesn't affect anybody else, but it may take me away from what I'm doing, really. I might start to neglect my own responsibility, things that I should be doing, because I'm perhaps believing myself to be better than others and having a rather self-centered view on whatever's happening. So, we do this perhaps more subtly and more often than we imagine. I mean, you've been in meetings with somebody who's always 100% sure their opinion is right, well, is my opinion always going to be right? Maybe somebody has a better opinion than me, right? But some people don't want to think that. And they might even be angry afterwards, because things didn't go their way, or the majority voted for somebody else's solution, not my solution. Well, you're part of this process, actually. Be part of the whole. Serve the whole. Don't be so concerned about yourself. So imagine two people are going for a vacant job. Wow. They might internally in their minds fight over this. But somebody might say, well, let the best person win, and if the boss chooses me for this job, I'm very happy to accept it. But another person might be calculating and think, how can I make sure this other person doesn't get the job and I get the job, right? So this is the fallen mind at work. It's where that self-centered viewpoint starts to get turned into some kind of action. And I might start, if I have that evil mind, I might start to put others down or put this other candidate down in order to win favor for myself and increase my own chances of winning. Can you imagine someone doing that? Especially in public life, can you imagine? And then it causes harm to others doing this, right? Because you're getting others to back you up and you're corrupting them in the process. Maybe a person who really wants that job, he says to others, if you vote for me or put in a good word to the boss, I'll make sure you get a little promotion when I'm made, I'm put in that position, right? They're in a way bribing people with these little favors. And it's getting others to back you up. And this is making you feel justified. And then a kind of final stage is getting others to do your dirty work for you. That takes some kind of accomplishment, right? But there are people who will try very hard to do that. So this knowledge is saying it's a process, these things. It's not poetry, but it's a very interesting process about what starts from a self-centered viewpoint or not taking God's standpoint in loving others, ends up multiplying evil and spreading kind of bad habits and bad actions. So it's an invaluable tool, we can say. I may want to find fault with other people knowing these things, but of course, if we're true to our religious quest, we should rather look to myself first of all, right? And examine myself. This kind of introspection and self-reflection is very important and very much part of the religious tradition. So that's where we're saying the origin of conflict lies, right? Please don't feel there's any kind of beliefs that we're saying you have to adhere to or accept or anything like that, but treat it more as a kind of, I hope it's a helpful explanation, right? At least you'll know what Father and Mother Moon are thinking when they're tackling these problems. Well, the path to peace, then, starts in the same place as that problem. Where did we say it started? In the mind, right? So even UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, in its founding documents, its preamble to the Constitution, it says, since wars begin in the minds of men, and it probably is mostly men, it's in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed. Very deep insight, actually, right? Even though they tried to really push out any kind of religious language or religious thought, this somehow got through. Our, as we say, true mother, or Mother Moon, as the Mother of Peace, did some public rallies, very large rallies around the world. This one was in Vienna, and she's doing it under the theme, Peace Starts With Me, which sounds quite modern, but actually it's the same old truth that's there in the world's religions. It's me. I have to change myself first of all. The problem is deep inside of myself. And that's where peace starts as well. I have to unite my mind and body centering on true love and love others with that kind of heart. And then I can be part of the solution and not part of the problem. So this introduces a kind of important section of their the founder's teaching, which is called restoration. Restoration is, again, a use of a common word, but in a slightly new way. It's like restoring. From humankind's point of view, it's like salvation, but from God's point of view, it's restoring that original ideal that was lost. Right? So it's more from the Creator's point of view. And restoration is wherever we have an original position or status, and we lose that, as is described in the fall story, and it becomes a current reality that we've lost that position and status, then we have to find a way to go back. It's a reverse course. And if we attain that position once again, then we can say, well, that situation is restored, or I am restored. It's taking responsibility to correct a wrongdoing on many different levels, and it's making a conscious effort to restore what is lost. It's also going the reverse way to how that damage came about. So if I lost trust of somebody or friendship of somebody through perhaps lying behind their back, and they find out and they don't want to continue the friendship anymore, how do I win that friendship back? You know, there has to be a process, right? And maybe it starts by a sincere apology, but don't expect them to change instantly. Maybe a certain time is needed, and maybe you have to show your sincerity in some other way. You know, in a sense, I don't expect you to just forgive me, but you know, I want to do this to kind of pay you back and to show that I'm really sorry for what I did. You have to have that sincerity and that heart there. So restoration, actually, to go from, well, a pile of blocks to an originally intended tower of blocks. We've all been there, haven't we? Right? It takes effort from God's part, the Creator's part, and our effort. God's effort is 95% of that work, and our effort is 5% of that work, but needs to be done with our 100% effort and sincerity. Is that a new concept? Actually, I find it beautifully expressed in the writings of St. Augustine. Remember him? End of the 4th century. He said, "Pray as though everything depended on God, but work as though everything depended on you." And I think it's a beautiful balance for life, actually. You know, if we have that relationship with God, then we can pray. But don't just think, well, God will solve everything. Go and work as though it were down to you to solve everything. But also don't get big-headed about that, because you'll meet your downfall for sure. Recognize that so much of the effort is God's effort. So this restoration takes 2 steps. One is, we could say, a vertical aspect of restoration. It's where I do this self-reflection, I awaken my conscience, centering on God's word or higher values. And then I have to restore horizontal relationships where those have gone wrong. And that's establishing, once again, a proper order in relationship with others and uniting with my brother or sister and be able to bring success. It has to be in both areas, actually. And that can move us closer toward the goal of peace. So reconciling with each other. It's there in other scriptural traditions and religious traditions. In the Holy Quran, it says the repayment of a bad action is one equivalent to it, but whoever pardons and makes reconciliation, his reward lies with God. He does not love the unjust, but whoever endures patiently and forgives, that is a sign of real resolve. In Jesus' central teaching, with its Jewish origins, because he's quoting the Torah, the Old Testament, the first law, when he's put on the spot to say what's the most important law, he doesn't give an answer, one answer, he gives 2. He says the first law, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind or strength. That's the vertical aspect. And then he says the second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. That is establishing that proper, rightful, horizontal order by expressing that love based on that kind of inner correction which you've done as an individual. And this is integral. A lot of my quotations come from the Holy Quran, but fine, okay. I sure could find somewhere else, but isn't it nice to appreciate this? Here it says, and be steadfast in prayer and regular in charity. And whatever good you send forth for your souls before you, you shall find it with Allah. So, steadfast in prayer, again, is the vertical, isn't it? And regular in charity, this is your helping to restore this horizontal balance and harmony through caring for others. So it's there. It's there. It's wrapped up in the teaching and in the word of the prophet. It's amazing how you'll find these things. Just as a more modern-day scientific approach, which is kind of further developed in Father Moon's teaching when talking about what he says the foundation of faith, this vertical element, and the foundation of substance, a horizontal element between people. Here you have Sikhism in the Adi Granth again. Where there is forgiveness, there is God himself. So we had difficulties in the first family. We referred to that in the previous section. So Adam and Eve were involved in illicit love and inherited fallen nature. There's a corruption of love going on, and that's the parents' problem, but it gets visited upon the next generation, and the next story that we have in that tradition is the Cain-Abel story. They are sons. One is jealous of the other because the younger has his offering, which he's asked to make, accepted, and the elder one doesn't have his offering accepted. Presumably he didn't do it with the right heart or right mind or in the right way, but he takes it out on his brother, and he follows him out to a field and brings a jawbone of an ass down the back of his head and breaks his skull and kills him. And then when God says to him, where is your brother? He says, am I my brother's keeper? Am I the one who should be looking after him? He has this kind of strange attitude. We can see already fallen nature at work there. Like, it's not me. Why are you accusing me? Of course, because he did it. And God knows he did it. But he's not owning up to it. He's not taking responsibility for that. Very interesting things going on in this story in terms of psychology, actually. God wanted, we could say, to embrace both Cain and Abel by having them work this out between them in a positive way. And then he could embrace them, and any influence, bad influence from the parents could be weeded out of that lineage. So it's restoration in the family. And look at God's words. It's very interesting to me. Anyway, this is Genesis 4. God says to Cain, who's full of resentment now and wants to take revenge on his younger brother, God says, if you do what is right, will you not be accepted? What a wonderful motto for life, right? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. Its desire is for you, but you must master it. You must get a grip of these feelings and these thoughts and these tendencies. In other words, the solution is there. It's in your hands, and I'm pleading with you to do that, and the opportunity is there to do that, so go away and do it. Overcome these kind of bad tendencies. But he doesn't. He gives in those tendencies. So again, it's his responsibility, because if that responsibility is taken away, it's not restoration, because Adam and Eve failed in their original act of responsibility to obey the commandment. So it's not restoring that problem. Are you with me? So we can look at these histories from this point of view of something going wrong and needing to be restored. God's 95% that we talked about is setting up that situation where restoration can take place, and then it's just the person's 5% of responsibility to do it properly. Well, there's an archetype of conflict here between these brothers, Cain and Abel. And we could say that Abel should do certain things. He should be humble, he should forgive, he should serve, he should help his brother, he should stand right with God. So Abel has a role to do that. and to establish that kind of first foundation, this vertical foundation. What should Cain do? Cain should let go of resentment. He should value his brother, even as his younger brother. Forget all this like I'm superior because I'm older stuff, right? If your brother has done something acceptable to God, go and find out why and how he did it and ask for his help. Humble yourself that much, right? Be ready to reconcile. Don't act violently. That just multiplies the problem. So he has a particular task to, in particular, overcome this fallen nature, which has been inherited from the parents and in the story originally from the fallen archangel. Later stories show the reversal of this. If you go to the grandsons of Abraham, you have Esau and Jacob. They have a similar incident which brings up resentment from the elder Esau towards the younger Jacob. He's out to kill him, but somehow, amazingly, there's a restoration here. The younger makes many conditions and many prayers, goes through difficult tests, and does it with the mind that at the end of a 21-year course, I want to go and reconcile with my brother and take away his resentment. And he can do that. It's a fascinating story, more than I can go into today. But it leaves in Rev Ramon's thinking a kind of helpful typology. Okay, this is one religious tradition or two or three together, but it's limited, and yet it produces some universal truths. So he talks about Cain and Abel positions. Cain has to go back through Abel, and obeying Abel can be reconciled and find unity centered on goodness and true peace, actually, through uniting with that common purpose. So there's a route back. And in any conflict, there will be one side which is more Cain-like than the other, and one which is more Abel-like than the other. And if they're both as bad as each other, it's obviously very difficult, right? But you have to encourage the Abel side to really be Abel type and stick to those principles. And Cain has to be encouraged to overcome those tendencies of fallen nature, to give up violence, to put aside your weapons, to do this kind of thing. So you can see already, although I'm not spelling it out, how these theories lead into the peacemaking work of Universal Peace Federation, right? It's a profound insights which are adding to the already many. You can go to university and study conflict management or international relations and conflict resolution. You can do these things, and very valuable that is too. You can be really instrumental. But these are providing extra insights which are kind of universally applicable. Brothers must unite to go together this way of goodness. So this typology becomes such that you can say, well, this is, yes, it's typical of that struggle between mind and body, right? The body is like Cain and the mind is like Abel. The body has to come through the mind as we elevate the mind through our sincere practice, and then it can come back to peace or come to reconcile with God. Likewise, any devotee following some guru or following a religious leader or founder is going through this kind of process. They're putting themselves in a more humble position, and even they may physically be older than their spiritual teacher. They are saying, no, through this person I can receive God's word, and I can be enlightened, and I can value and benefit from that wisdom. Communism, as the more Cain type, has to come through democracy to find ultimate peace, and they unite together that way. Also, you can say any issue that you're dealing with has a kind of Cain side and an Abel side. If you look at things under common national debate, and they're hotting up at the moment again, like abortion or assisted dying or this kind of thing, any of these issues has quite developed two sides, right? To argue their position, and both seem quite attractive. It's almost like, which one do you hear first? You'll kind of go with it, right? Because they both have merits, actually. Just as Cain is not evil, Abel is not good, they're both a mixture of good and evil. But the way out of that mixed situation is to strengthen the Abel position and then lose the fallen nature that's associated with the Cain side. So in these issues, you will find one is more kind of life-affirming and life-valuing and saying, well, life is valuable because it comes from God. Others will be saying, no, it's more any individual's choice. This is your choice. This is, your right. And it's very much about rights and fairness and the kind of things that Cain was concerned with. It's not fair that my brother's offering was accepted and mine wasn't. Well, you should have thought and reflected more deeply on that, I would say. So there are failures on both of these sides when you come to look at them. But let me just skip to a little summary of Father Moon's philosophy of peace. It blends individual elements, and we've talked about that quite a bit, actually, familial elements and global elements. So it's saying that without peace in the family, we can't talk about global peace or peace in the world. We have to consider these other areas as well, and some revolution in our thinking in those areas. He called this philosophy, he used different names, probably depending on his audience. Sometimes he called it Godism, or maybe parentism. But this is his thinking, the same. And other thinkers have, said things which absolutely support this stance. If you think about Dr. Martin Luther King, he said, we must discover the power of love, the redemptive power of love. And when we discover that, we will be able to make of this old world a new world. We will be able to make men better. Love is the only way. And Father Moon saying, as a final quotation, I'm teaching you to love those who hate you. If you love them, sooner or later they will come to like you. If you return good 3 times for every time someone does you wrong, eventually that person will bow their head. Try it yourself and see if I am right or wrong. It takes a bit of courage to try that, right? And you also have to think it out, how to employ this. But as he says, everyone has a conscience. Everyone has that original mind and heart inside themselves. And we need to touch that, right? And reveal that. Even the person themselves may be surprised. So thank you so much, everybody. God bless you. Seizing up.
Was that good? A lot of insights. So I'd like to do the same thing with the groups again. So here if you can have one group there, one group there, one group here. How about the group at the back? Was it too noisy before? Yeah. So can we have one group go downstairs to where the sofas are and meet there, and then we'll just have 3 groups here. Ian, you don't need to go down. But maybe back there, the last group on this right side could go downstairs. You could join the group in the front. So this is until until 25 minutes past. So you have 25 minutes.